Hello, my name is Annette DeLu, and you are listening to The Heart of You. Welcome back. Today is a really exciting topic because we are going to talk about house healing. So I am welcoming Tim Walter to the show. He is a house healer, geomancer, professional dowser, and intuition life coach. Tim, thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for inviting me along.
So how I usually like to start these episodes is to ask you a little bit about you and your journey and how you came to this spot where you're doing this beautiful house healing and intuitive life coaching.
Yeah, it certainly has been quite a journey. I guess it really started back in 1998 when my wife and I made the, very ordinary sort of life decision to move house. So we were living in the southeast of England. It's southeast of England, south of London. It's a pretty congested sort of space. And we were living in a little 2 up, 2 down. We had 2 little boys, 8 years old, 5 years old. And there was one morning where I was traveling to see one of my clients. I was a freelance video producer at the time, working in the corporate sector most of the time, traveling to see a client. And it took me an hour to travel about 3 miles.
Oh, wow.
And I basically rang my wife and said, I think we've definitely got to make a decision. We've got to move. So we looked around and settled on a fairly sort of adventurous step of traveling right over towards the Welsh borders. And we ended up living in a part of right on the edge of England called the Forest of Dean, which is just the other side of the River Severn, which is a fairly major river in the UK. And that was an absolutely beautiful part of the world. We were surrounded by, as the name suggests, a forest. It was a deciduous forest. And it was glorious. We lived in a village that was just on the edge of this sort of area, had a fairly major road running through it. And we lived actually in a house, a Georgian townhouse that was right on this A road. But the point was that this amazing Georgian townhouse that we managed to buy for the same price that we sold our little 2 up, 2 down was a glorious building. It had 5 bedrooms, a massive garden, plenty of space for the kids to run around and play football and all this sort of thing. So it was a real life-changing step. But what we hadn't realized was that the management upstairs really had a different plan for us, and it really was a life-changing plan, because we soon after we moved in there, we started to sort of pick up some weird things happening in the house. And I was getting like impressions of shadows of people moving into my peripheral vision and this sort of thing. And we had a space out the back of the house the whole house needed a lot of redecorating. It needed a fair amount of work. And there was one particular room out there that had just been used as a storeroom by the previous owners. And it was in a pretty dreadful state, plaster coming off the walls and this sort of thing. And it transpired that we had the spirit of a lady living there. And that's really the room that she used to hang out in.
Wow.
I can tell you a little bit more about that, but fundamentally meeting that spirit by using dowsing really absolutely changed our life, changed my life in particular. I think my wife kind of took it in her stride, whereas I was sort of like, this is amazing. Why don't I know anything about this? What's this all about? How can we have a quote unquote ghost living in our house? So yeah,
wow.
That's how it all started.
So that was your first experience ever with supernatural, with any of that?
Yeah, fundamentally. Yeah. I did have the occasional sort of precognitive dream when I was in my late teens, early 20s. So I hadn't really ever experienced anything in that way. I wasn't sure whether I believed in ghosts. My wife and I used to occasionally talk about it, like any couple does. She had the odd sort of weird experience, but nothing quite like we were getting there. But the thing to say is that what was happening in the house, because what we did, we were having things like lights flashing and various strange things. And there was one particular thing that happened to me that was kind of like one of the clinchers, which was that I was simply making a cup of tea in the kitchen and I put my hand out to pick up my mug. And there was another arm literally next to mine, a couple of inches from mine, mimicking my movement, but it wasn't my arm. It had a black sleeve on it, hand on the end, and it just mimicked my action as I put my hand out, and it was there for the fleetest of moments. And I thought, I stopped and thought, no, I didn't, no, I didn't see that. But it was, it was really there, and I hadn't had any experience like this before. But we had builders in, and a guy was giving us a quote on some work, and it's a standard sort of builder. We hadn't met him before, and he said, that it's a lovely old house, but I think you need to get it spiritually cleared. And Nikki and I, my wife and I, sort of looked at each other and said, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, I think you've got somebody here. I think you need it clearing. And he said, my wife happens to do this sort of thing, he said.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. And said, shall I ask her to come round? And so actually, a few days later, we actually had 3 ladies turn up on the doorstep. And I like to say it was like the 3 witches of Macbeth coming in, and they were great. They did this house clearing process that they used just, for fun as a hobby. It was part of, they were part of the local sort of spiritualist group. Lovely people. And they introduced us to the spirit of this dead lady. And as a result of that, I picked up dowsing rods, and started, having conversations with her. And she turned out to be a spirit called Jane. The first thing she really said through these ladies was, I've been trying to get their attention, Tim and Nikki, trying to get their attention. I just want to be part of the family.
Oh.
So that was our introduction to it. But no, just to answer your question, no, I hadn't had any kind of experience like that before. And I was completely dumbfounded by it in a way. But the other thing, though, Annette, is that actually, as all of this was happening, this bizarre conversation was happening with, these 3 ladies standing there with their dowsing rods, asking questions of an invisible, I couldn't see anything. I couldn't douse at the time. So we were just standing there watching them, but their rods were responding, in unison to answers, because I couldn't hear the answers. And then, she was the lady in charge, as it were, was just talking the answers back out loud. And the rods were moving in unison to confirm things, or to say, no, that's not the case. But the thing was that it just felt the most natural thing in the world. It just seemed like, yes, of course we're doing this. Of course we've got somebody living here. Of course we have.
Yeah.
It was amazing. It really was amazing.
Wow. When you discovered this, and then when you were having this sort of experience with them telling you what was going on, what was your first instinct? Was your first instinct to embrace Jane and allow her to hang out with you and be part of the family? Or was your first instinct to like, okay, no, we need to clear this energy from the house entirely?
Oh no, there was never any thought of clearing that energy, of clearing her out of the house, which is an interesting question. I mean, I don't think I'd ever even considered that up until you've asked the question. Because she was introduced to us in such a way that it was made clear what the lady that was in charge of the group was called Mary. Now, what Mary said she was getting as a result of her dowsing and her intuitive connection to the space that we were standing in, which was that dreadful room at the back of the house, was that there were what she called dragon lines there. And Jane, as we came to call her, or came to know her rather, Jane was there as a guardian personality to help ease the flow of these blocked lines. That's the sort of general picture that she was saying. So the focus was on what seemed to be the problem was, well, there are these lines which I'd never heard of. I'd never heard of dragon lines. I didn't know what earth energy was, or Leylines. I had no idea. And so there was this thing, but we also had, a benign spirit looking after that for us. So we didn't have to worry about it, but it was a bit odd. But okay, we're going to embrace Jane. So we did. I learned to douse so that I could talk to Jane. And she basically stayed in that house with us for 15 years that we were living there.
How incredible. When she told you that this is what she does, so she's this guardian, did she tell you that this was like her decision to stay sort of earthbound, that she had, decided to do that? So in other words, like she doesn't need somebody to help her cross over or anything like that because she's chosen to do this?
Yeah. The information with Jane came through in a lot of small conversations. So in that first encounter, we didn't ask a lot of information about her guardian role. We were more interested in like, well, were you alive? And the fact is, what the picture that she was presenting was that she used to come down to our house as a little girl. She had lived just outside the village in like the Victorian times. So that would have been, relatively soon after the house was built. Our house was an infill between a couple of others. So she had been incarnate. She had chosen to take on this role that she had. So this role of being a guardian was a role that she had chosen upstairs in the afterlife and had wanted to take this role on. And she had the freedom to come and go, really, as she pleased. And in fact, we won't go into it now, but maybe we'll circle around and talk about it a bit more later on. But there was a period where she left us and we had another personality come in and take the guardian role. But then Jane came back again. So she was a little, she was very, very mobile in that sense. But we used to talk about her role as a guardian, the nature of earth energy, because obviously she was, she did reveal fairly early on that that's what she was doing there. She was looking after these lines, and she described it as being like a policeman on traffic duty, if you remember. So in the States, if you've ever got a situation where the traffic lights have conked out,
gone.
Well, they've got, you get a cop turns up maybe and starts to signal the traffic, go this way, you lot stop, come this way, and all that. Yep. That was the impression that she was giving of what she was doing with the energy of these lines, was helping it flow where it should, quote unquote, should flow. But, this was all in various conversations, so it all kind of came out in bits and pieces. But the thing was, just to take it on a step further, having met her and, being introduced to this concept of energy lines, I spoke to my dad about it. I was saying, never guess what's happened, blah, blah, blah. And he was a bit like, really, that sounds a bit unusual, but it sounds amazing. And, are you okay? Because he was a little bit concerned about my mental well-being.
Sure.
He talked to his sister and she bought me a present, which was a book called The Sun and the Serpent by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. And The Sun and the Serpent is about Hamish's and Paul's journey to uncover and follow two earth energy lines across the south of England. So there's a couple of earth energy lines they're now called Michael and Mary. They start in Cornwall and they go through many sacred sites of the south of England, including Avebury and Glastonbury, Torre. And these lines leave the coast in Suffolk. And they're really well-known lines. And in fact, they are marked in many counties now as pilgrimage routes. So Hamish and Paul had put this book together, and they had spent 10 years of their lives dowsing these lines. And it's a book that's still available. And quite frankly, anybody that's interested in the slightest bit about earth energy or ley lines or simply dowsing or connecting to the earth, you've got to read The Sun and the Serpent, because it's a classic. And as a result of reading that book, I did some more research about Hamish Miller. And in the end, I met the guy and had the absolute pleasure and privilege of working with him on and off for the last 7 years of his life. He passed away in 2010. And Hamish Miller is the most wonderful man I've ever met. He was just so open-hearted, so big-hearted, so driven by a desire to help humanity as much as he could in his own little way. And he influenced me a huge amount. And I learned a lot from him too.
Incredible. And it's such a beautiful path how all of this completely unfolded for you. And I have to just mention that it is super synchronistic at this moment, because I just had an Akashic reading with a client 2 weeks ago. And oftentimes we go through soul purpose and life purpose and things like that. And one of the soul's purpose items that we were covering for this person was that she was an earth guardian.
Right.
I had never heard that term before. I had never really known what exactly that meant. Obviously, I've seen, grid workers and things like that, but earth guardian was the first time I had heard that terminology from my guides. And the way that they showed it to me was like each guardian was standing at a particular point on earth, and they were all connected by lines.
Hmm.
And I couldn't really describe it better than that. And that was essentially what I was getting. And so what I was getting was that it was, sort of they were in charge of a particular portion of these lines. That's as far as I went because I didn't get any more information. It is so incredible that now I'm having this conversation with you. You're telling me all of this other information about basically the same subject. I'm like fascinated right now. I'm so excited to hear more because now this is sort of explaining a little bit more about what I just learned about a couple of weeks ago.
That's great, isn't it? Isn't that
Yeah,
wonderful?
I
It's
love when
lovely.
that works.
Yes, exactly. It is lovely, and that's what we hope for, isn't it? To actually be in the flow that we have these synchronicitous events, and we understand that they are that, and that we are in that flow, which is fantastic. So the image of somebody standing on sort of crossing points of a web, which is the way that I perceive what you were describing.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk in detail about the Earth energy lines at this point? We can dive right into that now if you want.
Yeah. Let's do it. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. So the image that you were talking about there, where you've got a person standing at the effectively the crossing point where lines cross. It, in my mind, it summed up this idea of a web of interconnected lines, and really that is what we have got in the subtle realms. That's what the Earth is surrounded by, and really as the etheric template, if you like, of the physical form that the Earth is. As human beings, we're experiencing it in the very limited 3 dimensions. And we're in this amazing reality, which can be absolutely beautiful, but it is absolutely defined by linear time and defined by the separate nature of everything.
Mm.
Now, if we go into the higher vibrations, into the subtle realms, as I call them, the subtle realms is where we find Earth energy flows. It's these flows of wonderful energy across the landscape, flowing like rivers. So don't think about this as being straight lines. This is not a formalized kind of technical grid. It is an organic grid of flowing energy that is feeding the form that we experience as the Earth. Okay. So Earth energy flows like rivers. The important thing, and what you were being shown by your guides, was that where major Earth energy lines cross, such as at Avebury, Henge, or Glastonbury Tor, you have very strong power centers. So you get vortices, and you will know about vortices, and
Yeah.
like the very well known Sedona vortices in the States.
Mm-hmm.
But they're all over the place. So these big vortices of energy are fundamentally part of the mechanism of creation. We, as earthlings, so us as physical form, as human beings, obviously we are spirit beings within the human form. I mean, you know that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all your listeners will get that. As those spiritual beings in the human form, we have a responsibility towards the physical aspect of the Earth. And so, in order to be guardians of the Earth in the 3 dimensions, we have to be in the 3 dimensions. If we relate this back to our house, Jane, as a guardian of the subtle realms, was the equivalent of us who should have been understanding our role as a guardian of the physical energy. Do you see? This is where it puts humanity back, connecting to the divine and connecting to absolutely everything in creation, because we are all, in a way, guardians of the Earth, but not formalized. So your client was formalized, and that role that was going to be part of her soul journey this time would be to formally connect to the Earth and to have responsibilities and understanding and love and compassion and all the rest of it for that connection to the Earth. But each one of us as a human being, really, we have aspects of responsibility of being guardians for the Earth. It's just that we are completely and utterly disconnected from it and haven't been connected for so many millennia. And that's all changing, of course. So the Earth energy web is absolutely fundamental to the way that we perceive reality as well. This is really important because Earth energy is absolutely everywhere. And one of the things that I was shown fairly early on by Jane, and then also it was reinforced by what Hamish used to talk about and other research and other guides and spirit entities at sacred sites, that I really got keen on visiting sacred sites.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So what was very evident, and this is the crucial thing that I teach a lot about now and I talk a lot about, is that earth energy is absolutely everywhere. It fundamentally is what science regards as the 0 point field. So that means that's the quantum level of energy. That's the creative force of energy from which matter is formed. Where you've got concentrations of energy, it shows up as lines of energy, rather like a magnetic field shows up. But
Mm.
earth energy is like a combination of it's biomagnetic in a way. So it's like, well, it's geomagnetic. It's that combination, you know.
Yeah.
But really, it's going right down into that quantum level. So we're connected through it to the reality that we experience. And the key expression is that our life is the experience. And the experience of our reality is, you know, as we know from so many teachings, what is within is manifested without. It's the earth energy that is an integral part of the mechanism of that creative process of getting the internal stimuli of us doing our creative, co-creative part of manifesting reality. The information comes out, our emotion comes out, our, you know, all of the good and the bad comes out into the ether, is taken away to the creative force of the cosmos, wherever that is reflected back to us, because earth energy goes right through the cosmos. It's not just earthbound. It is cosmic. It is that field that permeates absolutely everything. And it carries back the response, and the manifesting ability of the earth combines with our physiology to create the experience we have of being alive as this human being and this human form. And it's all down to earth energy. Now, you are sitting in an apartment, I presume, in Paris.
Correct. Yep.
And you will have somewhere in that apartment a particular powerful earth energy center. You probably know where it is because you probably meditate on a fairly regular basis. And I can guarantee you, no, is that a yes
Yep.
or no?
Yeah, no, that's a total yes, because I was actually just having a conversation with a friend of mine yesterday, because I do all of my Akashic readings for my clients
Yeah.
in my living room.
Right.
And at one point I was like, oh, maybe I'll do it in the guest bedroom because I have a new couch in there and it'll be a nice little area. And it just didn't feel right.
Didn't work, no. And,
No,
and I can tell, I bet you that you've got a nice little earth energy power center,
Yep.
little vortex, rather, singular vortex,
Mm-hmm.
where you do most of your work and do most of your tuning in and do most of your meditation.
Exactly. Yep.
And that is there because you're doing that action there. Now, if you started and you decided, well, you're going to go do your work now from a different room, then it will move. You will get another power center will develop in the new location. But an easy way to work with that is you just ask it to move. So, yeah. So it's because it's completely malleable. It's an intelligent ether. It responds to us if we are open to understand that we can communicate with it.
It's a conversation.
It is.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's so good to know. I love that.
It's quite life-changing, really.
Seriously.
Yeah.
When you started working with dowsing and when you started looking at actually becoming a house healer, how did that come about? And how long did it take between the time you started talking to Jane to when you started realizing, oh, this is something that I'm super passionate about and that I really want to start exploring for my life?
It wasn't quick. That's
it never is.
No, because it's life. You know, it has been part of my life. So to start, and up until 2013, I was still producing videos and doing all that sort of stuff. From 1998 through to 2013, so what is that, 20-something years? My maths is terrible. I was losing so much interest in the corporate.
Yeah.
Well, you know, as you can imagine, the spiritual stuff, I mean, I don't actually like that term, but, you know, let's go with that for the moment, was so fascinating. And working with Hamish, making videos, that's what we did together, was so wonderful that it was just completely eclipsing everything else in my life. My business was gently sailing down the Swanee because I was not interested in it. And I got different sort of clients. I did a lot of work with Ecotricity, which is a green energy company, and it's run by an amazing entrepreneur called Dale Vince. And I did a lot of work with him, and that was interesting and exciting, and that was great. But the thing was, for most of the time, still 1998, for good 10 years plus, I didn't really talk to anybody about it. It was
Mm.
just something that I was keeping to myself. Nikki and I would go down on Sunday morning quite often and just have a chat with Jane about what was going on, how were things. And, Jane would occasionally sort of ask to speak to us. She had a method of doing that. This development of understanding of there was another path waiting for me if I chose to take it was a very slow one. And I was very, very slow to pick it up. If I'd been a different person, I could have changed my life instantly and just embraced it and had a completely different 10, 15 years or so. Basically, what happened was the crunch point was that in 2010, when Hamish passed away, I said, I'm either going to step into this role that I think is there for me, or I'm not. I'm just going to keep it all quiet. I mean, I'd started doing some small little workshops from home to introduce people to dowsing and to earth energy, and only sort of had about 30 or so people over different workshops come through that sort of process. So I was starting to, sort of quite enjoy talking to people about it gently and quietly and to very specific, little groups. But there was always the feeling that I should do something more about it. And Hamish always wanted to spread the message. That's why we made the videos, to spread the message about how dowsing as a methodology is such a simple and easy and gentle way to open the door into the spirit world, into the subtle realms, into that other aspect of us, of self. And he always said, all we have to do is to help people realize that they should try to raise their energy from the lower chakras up to the heart chakra.
Mm.
And it took me decades to realize for that simple saying, he said it a few times, for that to actually sink in and realize that actually it's incredibly simple what we're asking people to do. And in fact, what spirit is asking us to do as a species, which is to shift to the heart and to function from the heart and to create, co-create, manifest, live our lives from the heart. That's what we've been asked. And it's very simple, but it's also incredibly difficult. So, it's an amazing journey.
I like to say that it's almost as if like it's a simple saying, like you don't know until you know. And then once you know, that's it. There's no going back. But it's like the getting to the knowing part can take a while.
Yeah, exactly. And it can take a lifetime, of course.
Yeah.
There is a terrific book that I'd like to just mention, which is written by Dr. James R. Doty. You might have read it. Into the Magic Shop.
No, I haven't.
James Doty is a neurosurgeon. He's a brain surgeon. But when he was a child, he loved magic. He happened upon a local magic shop and went in there to try and buy a very cheap magic trick because that's what he liked. And on that day, the shop was being managed by a lady who decided to take James under her wing and to teach him real magic. And basically, this lady, for about 6 weeks one summer, taught James, the young James Doty, about the stuff that you and I talk about and help other people with, about manifesting and working from the heart. And the key thing in this book, Into the Magic Shop, the big takeaway, it's a really simple read. It's a lovely read. But the key thing is, it is so important to be able to understand yourself and to connect to your own heart with that power of compassion. Because once you've done that, then everything else falls into place. If you're following a lot of these kind of manifesting gurus and you got to do it like this and this is the way to do it and you can change your world. Okay, fine. You're going to connect to the manifesting system with a great deal of power, but you ain't going to do it with love. And the love is the crucial point.
And you can feel the difference between when something is being forced and when you're doing it from love, right? Yeah. And there's never force in love.
No,
there's never exertion or forcing or any of that. That energy you just put forth in describing those videos, that's exactly what you feel from those videos. It's like, oh, I must manifest this. I must do this. It's that, that pushing forward energy that, no, it's a soft, subtle energy of allowing and being in that love space. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll have to read that book. I haven't read it. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's great. But I'm plugging it all over the place at the moment. I read it a couple of months ago, I think.
Beautiful.
But yeah, it's terrific. So yeah, the journey to then move on to do what I'm doing now, which is to is to help. I train house healers, and I work with a small group of house healers and help them along, and do what I can. That decision was, as I say, was fundamentally linked to Hamish passing, and that was in 2010. So here we are in 2013. Around about that time, just before he passed away, I was doing some self-development work and linking to what I perceived to be a very powerful guide, and getting guidance from a mentor to learn to channel, basically. And I was really keen on the idea of connecting to this guide in that way that mediums do. And I thought, well, that might be a way for me to do it, because one of the things, when I say to do it, I mean to get the message out to the public, because one of the things is that I'm an incredibly shy person. I'm very private. This world of social media and the internet marketing and all this stuff is very difficult for me. And I actually started this process of talking more in public about spirit and the journey and earth energy in particular by enabling my guide to do the talking. So he was integral to that section of the journey, and of course he's still there, and you know that.
Yep.
Yeah. So that took some time, and we moved north in 2013. Yeah, that's been 10 years of really formulating, really 100% working, and because I need to earn a certain amount of income, there's a very practical side to this. If I didn't have to earn a little bit of income, would I be doing the work I'm doing? Well, what I would be doing a lot of writing for sure, because I love writing, but would I be doing as much work with individuals? I don't know. So in a way, Spirit has made it that I need to push myself out of the comfort zone. I need to be doing stuff. And actually, I've discovered that I quite like it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great now. This is really lovely. It's lovely talking to people like you,
I love having these conversations. I could literally talk about this kind of stuff all day long. When you left the house, did you have sort of a talk with Jane to talk about the fact that you were leaving and, and all of that? Was there sort of like a departing between the two of you?
Yeah, we did. My wife and I, we'd packed up the house. The circumstances was that what actually happened was that we got to a stage where my wife was in a position to leave the job that she was in. So she was looking for another job. Because I was self-employed, I could be anywhere. And so that didn't matter. It didn't matter where I was going to be. So we basically said to the universe, where do you want us? Where do you want us to go? And what happened was that immediately jobs for my wife were just showing up around Leeds. And Leeds is a town in the north of England. So it was like, oh, well, obviously we're going to be heading north. So that's fine. So she got a job, and actually she got a job before we sold our house, because we had the house on the market for some time during all this process, this period. So Nikki, she had already moved out, and we'd got the house was all being packed up, ready to move. I would follow her and we would rent this house up north. So there was this one occasion, this one day where Nikki and I were together, and we said, right, let's go and say goodbye to Jane and thank her for everything. So we did. We went down to her room, which by that time, of course, had been, we decorated it, and it was a really lovely, lovely room. And I used to use it for the workshops and meditate in and all that stuff. And we were standing there, and Jane came to the fore, and I would see her in my mind's eye, not really in any other way. I mean, I could feel a sort of presence vaguely, but I've never been overly sensitive and, twitched in. But she was there, and Nikki and I were getting a bit choked. But it's like, it's like, oh, it's been so wonderful. Thank you so much. And it's like, we've got to say goodbye. And Jane just went, yeah, okay, bye. And then disappeared. And that was it. It was like, and I was looking at Nikki, and it was like, what? No, surely not. And that was it. Literally, she just went like disappeared into the distance.
So unceremonious.
Completely unceremonious, no emotion, because of course, actually, Spirit doesn't have the same kind of emotional tie to everything that we do.
Right.
So that was that. We were a bit sort of, jaw on the floor, like gobsmacked. Well, that was not, But the thing was that when I moved north and we were setting up home in the new rented property, I was meditating one day, some weeks later, And during that meditation, I felt a very familiar feeling. And I said, Jane, is that you? And she said, yeah. And I said, what are you doing here? She said, well, why not? Sort of that sort of impression. And it's like, oh, so you're going to be staying with us here? Yeah. So she was part of the team that I have around me. She now works very closely with me when I'm doing house healing. If I'm working on a job that's going to take some weeks, because sometimes this work can be spread over quite a long period of time, what I do is I ask Jane to go in and hold the space of the house that I'm working on so that we don't cause more concern for the client in the house than they've already been experiencing. Because sometimes when you open a space, it can cause a bit of chaos.
Yeah.
And you just want to keep a lid on that if we can do, and just keep everything nice and stable. And Jane does that for me in that sense. I'm just part of the team. We all do our little bit in the team.
Absolutely. So she basically got kind of a new job.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, it's an interesting way of describing it because there are other facets, other interconnected facets to Jane. So I would, we can say that for the time being, Annette.
Okay.
We can. I'm not trying to be cagey. It's just yeah.
Well, part of the issue that I've come across most of the time whenever I'm in the records and my guides are telling me information or I'm channeling information is that, I'll sit there and ask them questions and they'll say, there is no reference to that in your brain. You have no reference to whatever we're going to talk about. And so there's no possible way we can describe this in any way other than a close approximation. Yeah. So that's kind of, what I've gotten used to that in that sense where like, okay, so if we say, oh, so, Jane has a new job. Okay. Yes, but
that's right.
That's not exactly it, but sure. If you want to use that to wrap your brain around it, cool. You know what I mean? Like
that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They are amazingly patient with us.
Oh, incredibly so. Yes. Tell me a bit about your process. So how do you go about healing a house?
It's deceptively simple because basically what we do is we ask for a floor plan from the client. Usually we just work on the ground floor plan. And what we do is we sit there with the floor plan and we have a dowsing pendulum or a dowsing rod. So I'm hoping that all your listeners will know what a dowsing rod is, what the process is for that. It is a very clunky method of getting information through your intuition. Clunky because, there are so many levels that you can kind of move on from and step on from. When I was channeling and working with my other guide, I stopped doing a lot of dowsing, but I went back to it because it's just such a great way to get a really positive, affirmative answer and to use it as a key to open up and speak to the guides. So what we do is we sit there and we do the dowsing and we've got a checklist. If we're doing a very comprehensive analysis of the energy of a space, we've got a checklist that gives us about 50 different section headings to ask about, to look for things that could be disturbing the client on that occasion. Most of the time, it's nothing like 50 section headings. Most of the time, it's like a handful. Those 50 section headings include personal subtle energy as well. So there's a bit of chakra rebalancing and that sort of thing as well in there, as well as removing of attachments and stuff that we all build up during the day. But basically what we're doing is we're going through that list and we're identifying, are there detrimental earth energy lines? Are there detrimental toxic lines? Are there detrimental technopathic stress inputs? Are there detrimental blah, blah, blah? There's all of that thing. We're just looking for the detrimental stuff. And then we plot it on that floor plan. And then basically what we're doing is, because all of that information is given to us from the management upstairs, Hamish Miller he used this term, the management, to describe all of those beings in the higher realms of existence on the other side of the veil.
Yeah.
So the management gives us the information. And then what we do is we sit in meditation and we invite the management into that space and we effectively hold the space, connecting the healing powers of the management to the space, the person, the reality of that individual or family that is asking for assistance. So everything is done in alignment with divine will. Mm-hmm. And the influences are kind of subtle but significant. And I sometimes refer to it as reality engineering, but That kind of sounds a little bit like that's ego, human based thinking, but it kind of explains what happens because it's really, person comes to us with an issue. It could be like something as straightforward as lack of sleep, or it could be a more incursive, personality driven thing that's happening to them. So we could have an entity in a house. It basically shouldn't be there. It's not a question of it being banished. It's not a question of it being, this is not about demon bashing, and we don't want to really use the word demon, but there you go.
Right.
But some people that have been brought up on Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all that sort of stuff, they go, oh yes, that's what it's about. No, it's not about that.
Although I do have to say that it is Buffy is one of my favorite shows.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. But we can accept that it's a show. It's a movie.
It's a fiction. It is a fiction. And yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, quite frankly, I was asked some time ago to get involved in a ghosty type, one of these paranormal shows on TV. Mm. And I said, look, there's actually absolutely no point in me being involved because I am not going to be doing the sort of stuff that you want me to be doing. I sit very quietly. There is nothing to see. I mean, literally, there is nothing to see here. It's a man sitting in a room on his own being extremely quiet. Yeah. That is not good television.
Right.
So there we go. So it's about connecting again through the heart, allowing the management to do their work. We talk to the client, gauge responses, see what needs to be done. There's an element of life coaching that goes on in that process, and quite often what we find is that actually the issue that is arising for the client is because the management is saying, right, it's time you got on board on a slightly different track, and you need to be aware that your whole life is not just the material realm, there's this spiritual realm. Have a look at that, and this is the way we're going to wake you up. And so there are, as you know, a lot of people undergoing the spiritual awakening right now around the world, and it's about time, and some people have a really hard time with it. And so we are there for some of those people as well.
I love the fact that you brought up something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because it's a show that is almost like a comedic look at what we would deem to be what the supernatural would be, or what the other etheric realms are, or whatever it happens to be. And part of the issue sometimes with people not wanting to connect is that fear that is permeating through media. And exactly what you were talking about with that reality show, like they want to scare people. They want to like have that, crazy dramatic situation going on so people watch it. And it's like, that's actually going in the opposite direction of what we want to do, because it's just not that way, right?
No, exactly. Fear is driving all of the human lower chakra energies. Yeah. I mean, that's all there is to it. Fear is actually an outdated aspect of humanity. It's not required anymore.
Correct.
But part of this evolution that we're going through is the removal of fear and the understanding of our connection to the divine and understanding our true selves. But that is not a process that happens overnight. That's is taking many generations. The changes that we're going through now as a result of shall we use the term light workers? Again, it's a word I don't like, but the work of the light workers from previous generations, requesting help, wanting change, making change, living their own lives, of course. And that's very, very important, that the power of the subjective experience is the ultimate guidance for each individual human being on the planet. But then the choices that the individual makes in their own co-creative source energy adds to the whole, to the collective experience. And there's no denying that each and every one of the 7.5 billion souls on the planet does add to the collective psyche and the collective energy and the collective manifested experience of being alive. So 100%. We have a responsibility.
Yeah. And that being said, one of the things that we can do individually that does help with that collective energy, as you said, is to sort of eradicate that fear. I know about this firsthand because I grew up not being able to watch any sort of ghosty movie at all because I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And to the point where I wouldn't be able to sleep. Like it was awful. Like I had this just insane fear of anything ghosty of any sort. And as I go through the rest of my life, and, then I started to have, like you, I started to have little prophetic dreams here and there, had a couple of experiences, and was like, nope, shutting that down. Don't want to have
Yeah.
anything to do with that. Like, it terrifies me. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So I understand the fear that people go through, but I had to, throughout the course of my spiritual awakening, I had to go through a very rigorous stripping away of that fear in order to be in the position I'm in now and be
Yes.
able to connect the way that I connect now.
Yes.
When it comes to, sort of, as you called it, and I like the way that you described it, was sort of these detrimental energies. How would you address that with people who are in fact really afraid, who are really, really scared of some of these things that are happening?
Obviously, each and every case is unique. So
Right.
it's a bit difficult to talk in general terms. But okay, so if we're working with somebody that has incursions into their experience of reality, in other words, if they've got something happening in their house that is definitely due to a disincarnate soul or some kind of energy being, then it's a question of identifying, well, how bad is it? What's it like? What is occurring? How severe is this effect taking place? And what is that individual's opinion of it? And what is their role in the presence of it being there as well?
Mm-hmm.
When they are individual personalities, when they are beings of any kind, they can be communicated with, as long as we do so with compassion and respect. Or these beings can be severely damaging to people, but they themselves are not evil.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as saying, well, if you go swimming with sharks, you could get bitten, but the shark is not evil. It's doing what it needs to do. And these beings are part of the cosmos in its multi-dimensional form and infinite vibration. And they are simply in the wrong place. So when they are encountered with compassionate understanding and respect, they will move on. Their energy will be depleted. Now, what that then means is that we've got to work with the individual human being,
right,
to help them come to terms with what is going on. And sometimes that individual human being is too scared to take on board the truth as our subjective experience has witnessed it as the house healer, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So therefore, we don't necessarily impart all the details because there is no need for them to necessarily know. But most of the time, we are as open as the client can accept at that stage of their journey. And part of our purpose is to help all of our clients understand that the spiritual energy, no matter what form it takes at that point, is actually not predatory. It is not out to, fundamentally kill the person. It is not out to harm them. It is simply there because it is part of what is required at that point. It's the context of the exchange of different aspects of energy, of reality. It's all still strangely, and I still have to use the word strangely, it's all still strangely part of the divine.
It is, because it's all part of the collective energy of souls, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, we're all made from the same things, even if we might come from different places in the cosmos.
Exactly.
It's all the same. So, the way I like to look at it in terms of when people go into Akashic record readings, sometimes people are afraid of who they were in past lives. Oh, maybe I was somebody horrible. Well, we've all been somebody horrible, actually. So don't worry about it. If you need to know about it, cool. If you don't, the guides will tell me, and so we've all been most ends of the spectrum. And if you haven't yet, you will.
Yeah.
And that's part of our experience. And so to not have that judgment surrounding whatever a soul might be going through is part of that compassion you're speaking of.
Yeah.
I really do love, I don't know if you've seen the movie Soul.
No, I haven't.
The Pixar movie. I would recommend it because it has a really beautiful depiction of what a soul in pain looks like. So basically, you see the soul, the core of the soul, and the core of the soul is still intact. It's still pure. It's still divine. It's still beautiful. But what is around the soul is this like kind of dust cloud of debris
Yes,
that is
yes.
surrounding the soul.
Yeah,
And so in the movie, it shows like, the soul is like, I'm not good enough. I'm not this, I'm not that. And
yeah.
like the cloud is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it turns into this giant monster.
Mm.
So like the monster is made up of the psychic debris. It's not the soul itself.
Yeah.
And so it's the representation of how the soul is feeling and what is sort of being replayed over and over again. And so if you can imagine every soul being that beautiful, pure, divine soul on the inside, but then maybe has gone through some pretty rough things in their incarnations or whatever it is,
Yeah.
then you can have that compassion, and then it kind of removes that fear aspect.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, spot on. Yeah. Yeah. I like that description and that dustiness. My guide once described the trip that they make when they come nearer our vibration as just lowering into the detritus of humanity, into the, what we leave around us, in their vibration. It's like, do I really want to go into that? So, yeah.
Yep. It's like going into a vat of like little psychic debris and little dust clouds and stuff.
Yeah. Great.
So there's something I personally wanted to ask you about, because this was an experience that I had, and I did a little channeling with my guides about it, but I feel like you might know a little bit more about it, which is portals within spaces.
Yeah.
So I had an experience in Strasbourg. I was there for just a nice little weekend holiday, going to see the Christmas markets. And I had an experience with some portals in the hotel that I was staying in. It was a little boutique hotel, old house, right? And it's funny because whenever I stay anywhere, I always ask my guides, like, is it in my highest good to stay here? Like, is this a clear space? Like, I always do that before I stay anywhere. And my guides had guided me to stay there. And I was like, what's up, guides? Why did you tell me to stay here? And I think they did it because I needed to have this experience so I would know about this. So then I could, then potentially help other people. But the experience was actually in my dream state. And it was very clear what I was experiencing. Like it was a place, I was dreaming about the room itself. There was a space in the room where things and people and spirits were coming out of. And I remember thinking, this is very disturbing. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I have to ask my friend who's with me if her dreams are this weird. And so after a little bit of exploration, I asked her the next day, she goes, oh my God, the energy was so weird. I woke up in the middle of the night, went to the bathroom and started like, just energy clearing. Like she's like, it felt really gross. And And so then I asked my guides, I was like, can I close these portals and can I clear this energy? And they're like, no, you can't. And I was like, oh, why not? They're like, well, A, because you don't know how yet, and B, because this isn't your space. And I was like, okay. So can you tell me a little bit about that, about how that works?
Yeah, well, I mean, portals are, you can find them anywhere and everywhere.
Right.
And as a concept, a portal is simply a doorway. So a link between dimensions, a link between vibrations. In a way, you can even think of a human being as being a portal, because we're in the physical senses, but we also have this amazing inner universe as well. But obviously, that's not the sort of portal that you're talking about. So portals in a space, they can manifest as, or they can show up as in the house healing as in varying forms. The classic sort of portal, it's usually a vortex, does show up. I suspect that your guide said, no, you can't close this one because that, as you just said, really, it's not your thing. You're here for a different purpose.
Right.
If you had very nicely and tidily closed that one off and done and dusted, you would, at that point, you would probably have thought, oh, this is great, I must do some more of this. And you would be doing that instead of doing other stuff, which is clearly, you know what I mean? It's clearly they have other plans for you. So,
You're right.
Because the fundamental process with portals is exactly the same as everything else. We highlight where it is, we identify what it is. Quite often there are parasitic type beings that are coming through that sort of portal. Sometimes they just hang around the portal, or they will go off exploring. It depends what the being is and what the portal is connecting to. But the same process is that we simply ask upstairs to close it off and tidy it up and make sure it's not going to be opened again. So, it's all this work is done with intent. And don't forget that what we're doing at this level in the same way as you are when you're working with clients. What we're doing is working into that quantum field of infinite possibility. And that infinite possibility really is only limited by our limited context and thinking and experience and what we expect.
Yeah.
Right? So our reality really is driven primarily by the subconscious, by what we expect to encounter. So as you expand your horizons and as you expand your experience and as you expand your skills and your sensitivities, then you're expanding the potential of what can be found and discovered and worked with. So in that sense, this is part of the training that, that what occurs in the training as the students get more and more confidence. What that's doing is allowing them to relax more into it, opening up the doorways a bit more, opening up and expanding the horizons of possibility when they interact with the potential, the infinite possibility of the quantum field, which is where all these beings are. And therefore, it's life-changing not only for the clients that they're working with, but also for them.
Yeah. I'm really intrigued by this entire subject matter. And there's a part of me that I'm like, yeah, maybe it wasn't a no, maybe it was a not yet, because what I'm thinking about right now is the fact that since every single place on this planet, every single building, everything has an Akashic record, like I feel like there's some overlap there where like you could actually possibly look into the Akashic record of a particular building and use that in tandem, couldn't you?
Yeah, you can, absolutely. I mean, we look at what we call place memories. So we're looking at the past of a particular place. So when we're looking in, we over here in Europe, you've got it over. You're in Europe. I keep forgetting.
Yeah.
But every country in the world has experienced conflict, for example.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, you've got a house that has been built on a battlefield. There's a classic case in point. So the energy of that conflict and that confrontation will still be there. And really, that's what you're talking about, because you're talking about looking at the individual Akashic record of that specific spot of that particular place and seeing what happened there, who was there, what went on, where is, I'm not used to kind of formally going into into the big library. I ask upstairs and they tell if there's something that's relevant, then it'll come up.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. You can, you would be brilliant at accessing those healing energies through the Akashic records of the place.
One of the things that I also want to mention that I got from my guides in a channeling about the portals as well was that it's all relative. So in other words, if I was looking at that portal in that particular hotel room and what I was perceiving as sort of icky or negative energies, it's in relation to my own energy. So to somebody else, that might be who might be in lower energy than whatever was coming out of the portal, that might look like higher energy. You know what I mean? So it's all relative to where you are and who you are and everything that's going on.
It's all subjective. It's entirely subjective. And the notion of good and bad is a subjective moral standpoint that each individual has. So, one of the things that became really apparent to me when I started doing the house healing work was that actually, the idea that each one of us lives in our complete unique universe just for us, right? Just us as a vibrating being experiencing everything that we experience. And as we exchange, like you and I are now, we're exchanging our aspects of our individual universes with each other. So we're on the overlap point, right? Because of the vibrations are matching and we can communicate, blah, blah, blah. So, but what that means is that the power of the subjective experience for each individual human being, when they start to understand actually life is symbolic and all of this stuff that we associate with the material world is actually symbolic, and it's being presented not only by our co-creative process, but by what the management wants us to do. But we're interpreting it for what it is because we believe that's how we're supposed to perceive it. So the uniqueness of each individual person is absolute. And what that means is that you can actually step aside from saying, well, there's a rock hurtling through space at 20,000 miles an hour, which is populated by 7.5 billion souls. And it's really, really important that that rock continues its orbit because that's the one and only Earth, right? Don't look at it like that. Look at it like, okay, what 7.5 billion souls are creating every moment is the understanding that they are on a rock hurtling through space.
Mm.
But that's not the driver.
Right.
The driver is the consciousness, the vibration of being.
Yeah. So I do have one other question for you regarding animals in space.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about what role they play. Like, for example, I know the role that my cat plays with me in my space, but overall, what has been your experience with that?
Well, again, it varies per person. I mean, but animals are absolutely beautiful. They are incredible beings. We had a cat called Max. Bless him. He was a beautiful tabby cat, slightly greedy, but but a lovely character. He passed away during lockdown here in the UK, and during lockdown, if we had taken him to a vet to be put down, he would have been basically just taken away from us and put down.
Right.
And we doused with Max and asked if he wanted to wanted to go to the vet and all of that sort of stuff. And he was very adamant. It's like, no, I don't. I want to stay here. Excuse me. Actually, I find it quite upsetting.
Oh.
But anyway, bless him. On his final day, he was lying in the living room, and I'd lit a candle for him. And as I lit the candle, I heard this word 8. And I thought, what does that mean? What does 8 mean? There came a point later in the day where he sort of the cat came to and stretched and yawned and looked up and then just closed his eyes and went. And exactly that moment, the candle went out, and it was exactly 8 hours since I'd lit it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was beautiful. I mean, bless him.
Wow.
It was beautiful. And you know what? I tuned into Max soon after that, and I was expecting to meet a cat because I wanted to say, thank you for being with us and all of that. Mm. But what I met was the most beautiful man I have ever seen in my life, standing behind gates. If you can imagine the big pearly gates, if you like, it's a bit corny, but he was standing behind those gates because obviously there's that barrier between the live and the not live in that sense. And he just simply put his hand out and shook my hand. And it was gobsmacking, really was gobsmacking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can learn so much from animals when they're alive and when they're passing. And animal communicators, anybody can communicate with animals, but those people that have the gift of really tuning into them and having those conversations with animals as we can are very lucky.
Absolutely. I've had one on the podcast, and I've actually had a couple of sessions with her with my current cat. Mm-hmm. She confirmed what I knew, which is like he is definitely like a higher level being. He's not just a cat.
Yeah.
And I had another cat actually that was sort of his companion for a little while, and he was not too terribly fond of her because he's like, she's just a cat. But so I've actually told him, I said, well, because I know he's coming back to me one more time in this lifetime. And I said to him, I said, look, if you want a companion, you pick the soul, you pick the cat, like you pick everything. You just tell me what I need to do. Right. So did you actually end up being able to talk to Max in the spirit form and find out like what his role was for you?
Oh, I didn't actually go into detail. No, it was just the meeting, just the encounter, just that. That's what I left it at that. Yeah. I do sometimes wonder about my own intelligence.
Well, sometimes, I mean, especially when you're in grief, like to me, like the grief of losing a pet is just, it's like nothing else. It's so, because we love them so completely and unconditionally. And it's tough. So it's not surprising that you wouldn't think of that right there in that moment. Yeah. When it comes to like how they help us keep our spaces clear and sort of like watch over our spaces, what is your experience in that?
Personally, I haven't encountered the animals, the pets of people actively having a role in that. That's not to say that they don't, because, clearly people will experience that as being part of the reality of that experience.
Right.
When I work with families and pets are involved, it is usually I'm not asking those sort of questions. I'm
Mm,
looking at clearing them, helping them help the family as part of the unit, but I'm not doing anything specifically for the pet.
right.
So, I mean, actually, sometimes I see you're making me think now. I should maybe pay more attention to that in future, but which is fine. I might well do that. But sometimes I have in the past. I've been approached by some people where I'm working with the person and the pet because the person is so concerned about the way the pet is behaving. But actually, the problem for me then is to determine clearly, is the pet actually assisting the person, or is the person actually projecting onto the pet? And then
Right.
we've got the human level vibrations that are changing and acting and changing there. So I tend to, in circumstances like that, I tend to be just more concerned about trying to understand the picture. And I am guilty of allowing my brain to get in the way. So, I tend to say to people, can we just consider the pet separately once we've got through this first stage? So, and quite often the pet kind of just actually gets, okay, I'll use the words left out or forgotten. It's not terribly nice, but that's the truth. They kind of are left to themselves to sort themselves out.
Well, and I think they do, though. That's the whole thing, is
Yeah.
that it's probably a sort of a knock-on effect that you're doing the house healing. So if the pet is in fact helping with keeping the energy clear in the house, or at least trying to, that you're at least assisting that pet
Yeah.
regardless, right? So
It's very obvious when cats, decide to go and be sleeping somewhere else, once you've done a clearing, that they are doing something there, that they
yeah,
are processing stuff and moving things through and all the rest of it.
yeah.
Same as dogs do, but dogs just do it in a completely different way, I mean,
Mm,
it's
yep.
yeah.
You can feel it in the energy, like the difference between them. Like
Yeah.
it's night and day.
Yeah.
They do similar things, but it's in such, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like you
Yeah.
said, and it's in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to somebody who wants to get a house healing prior to living there, is that something you recommend people doing, or would you recommend they move in first and then do the house healing?
People do ask for that. They do want to have a house cleared before they move in. I will if I'm particularly busy, for example, I say, well, sometimes I can't do it. I can't fit it in the time frame. So I don't have a preference. I really just go with how it's being presented. Does it feel like it needs doing before they move in or not? The other thing that some people do is really considerate of them, is that they have the house cleared when they move out for the next person. So they,
Oh, that's lovely.
yeah, clear the space, which is lovely. I mean, the fact is, if you take our case as an example, if somebody had cleared that house back in 1998, the fact is that Jane would still have appeared.
Right.
We would still have encountered her,
Mm,
or somebody like her.
mm,
It would have happened because there was no
right.
way it wasn't going to happen. That's one of those cases where, digressing a little bit here, but
No, go
but
ahead.
it's one of those cases where the actual location and form of the interaction wasn't as important as the interaction as itself. So it's a case of, when we talk about, there's that platitude in spiritual circles of, it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
Mm,
The key point was that I was going to have this encounter that would be changing my life path. And, well, for me, I'm only talking about myself. It's made a difference to Nikki and the boys and stuff. But from my perspective, it was going to happen. And now we could have moved into a different house and we could have encountered a different being, but the process, the change would still have happened in
right.
that different aspect.
So would you say that's really the only time you're not able to clear something, is when it's clearly meant to be part of the experience?
The house healing work does not mean that every time we are called in to work on a house that we leave the client in, surrounded by roses and bluebirds flying and singing everywhere.
Right, right.
It doesn't always work like that.
Yeah.
So we are a part of the management's process in that sense. Our interaction, same as yours is when you're working with a client. You're aware of what the management are doing, what your guides are doing, what your guides are saying, what you're being guided to do. You're very aware of what's going on with the client and their team as well, I expect.
Mm-hmm.
So It's all part of the picture that's being presented. And one of the things that we do is I try to encourage people that are learning the house healing to abandon the whole concept of action, reaction, and law of cause and effect, and just literally look at the picture as it is being presented in that moment as you are communicating in that space at that time. So, are we always successful, and are we always moving things through, and is it always 100% lovely afterwards? I mean, no, I'd be lying if I said that. It's not the case, because healing is sometimes really painful, and sometimes we can't move everything or move the human being into a space where they are accepting of everything that's going on, or even comprehending everything that's going on. So no, we can't say that. It's not clear cut.
It's one of those situations that I tell people all the time, where if I have a client who's going to, let's say, get Reiki all the time, I'm clearing my energy. I said, well, if you're not getting to the core root of what is causing the energy to come up, then it's going to continue to come up. You can clear all you want, but it's still going to come back. So I imagine that because this is all energy, we're all energy, and that when you heal and when you clear, it comes off in layers. Sometimes it can't come off in one fell swoop. So I would imagine with the house clearing, it's the same thing, that it's like, okay, well, if there's something super, super like heavy that happened, then it's going to take time to heal. Potentially it's going to take layers. It's going to take multiple sessions. It's going to take whatever. I can imagine it's the same. Yeah.
It definitely is a case of healing working in layers. There's definitely a case of the onion going on. But it's not necessarily the case that a big incident, a dramatic incident happening in a location takes a long time to clear. That's not necessarily the case. You can minimize, eradicate, move off, shift, clear pretty big events pretty quickly. But that's not to say that there still isn't other crap to be dealt with for that person.
What is it that makes it more difficult to clear then? So like if you're able to clear big events, like what is it that makes it harder to clear or take longer?
It just depends entirely on the individual circumstance, entirely on the context.
Got it.
The context of the interaction of that moment is absolutely fundamental. We can't bring in our questioning analysis of why are some things easier than others. It's just, you really have to just go with the picture that is being presented. So literally being aware of your presence and your being in each moment. So as we do the dowsing, we're in that moment. What is coming up? Don't ever dismiss anything that you're given. Put it all down, put it into the report that is an acceptable way for the client to understand. And again, that's individual, as we've talked about. But then when we're doing the healing, again, in the moment, what's coming up? Sometimes the management get really active with what they're doing and show, and you can see it very clearly. Sometimes sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, is anything happening? Is anything going on here? And, I could even sort of ask the question with my dowsing, have you finished? And it's like, come on, give me a clear result here. Come on, have you finished? And so there's a vast difference of connection and process that goes on in each moment. But personally, I tend to look at it, I just have to put all of that logical cause and effect to one side. You just do what you're focusing on, do what you're being shown to do it. And then in another moment, at a later stage, you're going to be having an interaction with the client. What's happening for the client in that moment? Where is it? What's going on? What's being presented? And then dealing with what's coming up at that point. That's the only way you can work, as far as I'm concerned, that we can work through the energy work that's going on.
It reminds me of something that I experienced. I stayed in an Airbnb in Normandy, just outside of Mont Saint Michel.
Yeah.
And it was an old cottage that was behind the main house. So it was a really huge main house, and then it was a small cottage. And it was adorable. They had renovated it and everything else. They had only started renting it out like 4 years prior.
Yeah.
And we ended up talking to the owner, and it turns out that during the war, there were I think he said about 90 British soldiers that were like alternatively sleeping in this cottage. And during one of the raids, a bomb hit that exact cottage and basically killed all of the soldiers that were living in that cottage.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it had that cottage had stayed in a ruin since that moment until 4 years prior to when I was staying there.
Right.
And so during that time, a tree grew up in the middle of it, like nature took over. And so like when I heard the story, I was super surprised. I was like, oh my God, why didn't I feel any energies or anything going on in there? Like it felt pretty clear, like as an energy. And I was like, that's really weird. Usually I'd feel something like that. And then it dawned on me. I was like, oh, because it had time to heal. It had time for the earth to actually like sort of overtake and heal that space because nothing was done with it, because nobody was there. There was nothing interfering with it.
Yes, that's one way of looking at it.
Tell me another way of looking at
it. Well, I'm not sure that it actually gives us another way to look at it, but what's coming to mind is there's the concept of consciousness simply is in absolutely everything. So when we talked earlier on about, the idea that we are the vibration foremost, and the vibration of all of our 7.5 billion universes actually combines to create this one recognized form. That's the story that we tell ourselves. That's the story. And everything we work on in this three-dimensional environment of linear time is based on story. It's based on that structure of, okay, A to B to C to D. That makes sense. There's logic. That's what happens. That's how we communicate, because we have linear time. If we didn't have linear time, we couldn't talk to each other.
Right.
So, and as you know, when you get downloads from trees and things, it comes as a packet of energy. It's not actually in linear form. You have to kind of stick with it and decipher what's going on.
Right.
So in that sense of the cottage, your experience of being there and being there for rest and relaxation, and the tree had grown up and all of that, that's all story. That's all, it's reality, but it's all story. It's all something that you are giving meaning to. You are providing meaning to yourself by by creating the story and understanding the flow of information that has happened. So yes, the guys were there, the bomb dropped on it, it blew up, nature has taken over and healed. Right, okay, so that's great. That's the human aspect and understanding. But consciousness is actually working at the point where you're interacting with the person that's telling you the story and the history of the place. And the meaning is in that moment for you as that vibrating being, as a part of the universe, reflecting everything, looking for meaning, asking the questions why, and finding healing in an understanding that says, well, of course it's fine because it had time. And so what was it that you were needing to know from that moment in yourself? Right? When you start to really pick it apart, and look at it, and clearly you were on holiday, you were there for relaxation, you were there to have time out for yourself. Right. Again, another story, another human story.
Right.
But the moment was created because it's symbolic of what you needed.
Oh, right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. Thank you for that.
No, it's great. It's fascinating. We can get overly caught up in the story.
Yeah.
And I can get overly caught up in trying to explain the nature of the story as well, when we, because it can really do your head in.
It can. It can. And, the thing is that sometimes, and you're absolutely right about that, because sometimes it's like our brains can't accept certain things sometimes. Yeah. And sometimes it's like, oh, it's easier for our brain to understand something if we do attach a particular story to it.
Yes, absolutely. Even
if it's not necessarily harmful to do so in that particular situation, but it is, like you're saying, and I love the way that you're putting that. It's like if you're taking the moment for exactly what it is, that was the man who had owned the place and knew the story, was conveying that story to me, when in fact the reality of it was simply the reality of it. It doesn't necessarily need to include the story.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And actually, you see, it's a really good example of one of the things that my guide, it was actually Merlin, but I refused to accept that it was Merlin when he came through and I was working with him. So anyway, we settled on the name Merthin, which was the Welsh name for him. But anyway, so one of the early things that he said was because he was trying to get me to really, really focus in on the moment of being, because I used to be so stressed, so utterly stressed by everything.
Yeah.
And of course I was, constantly looking back and constantly looking forward and anywhere but in the moment. So one of the things he said, that the most important thing is to recognize the direct inputs into your own sensory system, especially in this modern world, that we've got so much information coming at us through tablets and phones and computers and all of the rest of that. Now, the technology can be great, but it can also be an absolute pain in terms of just spreading people's attention anywhere but now, here and now. Now, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that there was a plan to that. But I'm not. I don't adopt that. I'm not into that headspace. That's a story I don't want to put energy into. But it is a case that people's attention is spread anywhere but here and now. And when you start to look at the direct experience of the individual, so again, we come back to the subjective experience. What am I experiencing here and now directly in my reality? That's when you start to realize, like, oh, hang on, there's nothing wrong with this place. There's nothing wrong with this world, because my direct experience, which is what we're designed to do, is to directly interact with each and everything that we can perceive through our 5 or 6 senses. I'll say 6 just because I'm talking to you.
Well, of course, yeah.
but it's really about that direct input. It's not about what as you know, it's not about what the news says. It's not about the impression of what's going on in the world. It's not about the impression of what's going on in the world. So many people are driven by an impression of what's going on, and they're not actually paying attention to what is going on in their unique universe.
That's so true when it comes to literally everything in the world, because for example, take, going to move to Paris, I have had, some challenging times, obviously, French paperwork, all of that, and visas and all that. But like, overall, my experience has been pretty magical. And then there are other people who are like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. This is so hard. Oh my God, it's a horrible place. And yeah, of course. So like, how is it that you have 2 people doing the exact same thing, having 2 completely different experiences? Well,
exactly.
That's why.
That's exactly why. Yeah, exactly. It all comes back down to vibration. And it's not actually a woo-woo thing. It's not a spiritual thing. It's actually psychology and physiology. And, you've only got to look at the work of somebody like Joe Dispenza.
Yeah.
And you say, right, well, there's the proof. You go off and look at some of his stuff, or not you. I mean, if the listeners want to go off and look into more Joe Dispenza stuff on YouTube or any of his books, I think it's called Being Supernatural. That's a really good one. Then you'll see how we are built to really focus in on the moment and our individual our individual experiences of subjective experiences, but we don't. And it's right. It's all there. It's all there in there. And that reflects the experience we have. So I tend to stop referring to people's lives as lives. They are experiences. We are here and we have an experience.
Because, I love that.
Right? Because a life, we all go, oh, yeah, that's what we know what life is. You're here for 70 or 80 years or whatever, if you're lucky, and then blah, blah, blah. Well, no, it's not. It's an experience, and your experience continues. And there's a magical part of that experience which continues when you decide to leave the body that you're in at the moment. Exactly. And your experience continues through, and your experience will be what it is, and you'll still be experiencing, and it never ends.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a wonderful note to close the conversation. And before we do, I would like to have you sort of tell our listeners, how they could work with you, either through a house healing or as a mentor-mentee type situation, if they want to learn how to do house healing.
Yeah, that's been great. Thank you very much for this opportunity as well. I mean, for the chat, for the conversation, it's been wonderful to meet you and to share this time with you.
You as well. Thank you so much.
Yeah, people can really find me either through my website, which is www.knightsrose.com. That's KNIGHTSROSE, knightsrose.com, or go to YouTube and dig me out. If you put in Tim Walter House Healer or Tim Walter Dowser, then I'll show up. If you just put in Tim Walter, you're likely to get some kind of German football coach. he definitely isn't me.
Okay. Yeah. And that's how I found your YouTube channel as well, through your website,
Right.
but then also just I typed in your name and then house healer and it came right up.
Great, excellent. And if anybody's interested in I'm actually starting a house healing course in September, hopefully in September. And if anybody's interested in that, then dig me out from either of those places and drop me a line, because I do like to talk to everybody before they come on the course to make sure that we're a good fit.
So with the course, is that online?
It's experiential. We do it on Zoom. So I take people through a 10-month course.
Okay.
And the reason it is 10 months is because that is the time to get the homework done, to get the dowsing done. It's a self-development course. It really is about understanding everything that we've talked about today in the nature of the subjective being and the subjective experience of working with space and guides and all the rest of it.
Incredible. There's so much that is like going into this subject. And there are so many things that I actually saw on your YouTube channel that I was like, oh, I want to ask him about this and I want to ask him about this. And I'm like, we haven't even gotten to it. So
Right.
So I highly recommend everybody to go to Tim's YouTube channel. It is a wealth of knowledge. There were subject matters like geopathic stress and things like that you can really learn about and understand a little bit further about house healing. So Tim, again, enormous pleasure. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, Annette. Take care.
Have an amazing day and never stop exploring your soul, because it is the most important relationship you will ever have. If you are interested in learning more about me and the sessions that I do, feel free to go to my website at infinitesoullove.com. On all social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111. Hey, and if you feel called, I would love it if you could rate The Heart of You on whatever streaming service you're using, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please take a moment, give it a review. It really does help the channel. Thanks so much.